My small son, while doing his homework the other evening, whimsically said he wished he had his own private computer to help him. I reminded him that he has between his ears a tool far superior to any computer ever devised. The brain of man has 4 remarkable powers that far exceed anything yet built into a machine. 1, it has the power to absorb, to take in information and knowledge of every kind. We do this by reading, listening, touching, by using all 5 of our senses. Our minds are like unlimited corrals with the gates wide open. 2, we have the power of retention, the capacity to retain knowledge and recall it. Like a million filing cabinets, the human mind, which can capture, store, recall, and program more than 600 bits of information per second, keeps all of it readily available for recall and use, with unlimited space for additional information. 3, we have the power of judgment, of logical thought. The more facts we feed our brain, the more able it is to reason and judge intelligently. And 4, the greatest power of all, the power of imagination. The ability to think creatively, to create something that's never before existed on Earth, like a computer, to take old ideas and combine them into new relationships, to dream, to think of things that do not now exist, to project ourselves into the future with the automatic time machine of our minds. That's the power that's made man what he is. Our great humming modern computers are nothing more than the abacus was to the ancient Chinese, a better way to do our arithmetic and store information. We'll devise new and far more remarkable machines in the years to come, but we'll never create one as great as the human mind. If a greater agency is to appear on Earth, it will have to come from the stars. As Francis Bacon put it, seek ye first the good things of the mind, and the rest will either be supplied, or its loss will not be felt. Poking through my old files, I came across something I liked very much. It appeared some years back in McCall's magazine, written by Elliot Joseph, and entitled Secret Thoughts of a Happy Husband. A working wife is a gift from heaven. Sleeping late is not harmful. A shopping woman is an unhappy woman. This is a generalization based on the psychologically sound discovery that unhappy wives get rid of their frustrations by excessive shopping. Keep them happy and you'll save some money. It takes only one to make a good marriage. Fresh orange juice is the elixir of love. People who travel are easier to live with at home. And women are night people. It is humanly possible to have a good marriage. A woman with taste is always beautiful. Call your wife anything but mother. I know a man who calls his wife mommy, and every time I hear him do it, I find myself wanting to throw up. Thank your wife after every meal. Large twin beds are twice as good as any double bed. Nothing is more tangible to a woman than love. Never talk about your wife. Fat women are more fun. I don't know how that got in there. Man will remain uncivilized as long as he has to share a bathroom. You know, I've long thought that one of the prime reasons for earning an above-average income is so that a man and his wife can each have his own bathroom. Women don't understand soft-boiled eggs. A gentleman never refuses a lady. Women are usually right, but for the wrong reasons. Living for today builds memories for tomorrow. Women who wear men's pajamas make good companions. One woman is enough for a real man. Nothing can rival home life. Being yourself is always best, no matter how painful. Women have to be awakened with extreme care. And finally, living with a woman is a little like working backstage. Some secret thoughts of a happy husband. A long-time bachelor who finally married was asked some months later what kind of a match he'd made, and he said, well, I really didn't do as well as I expected, and to tell you the truth, I don't think she did either. Some years back, the head of a large, successful business enterprise was faced with the most important decision of his career. At a special meeting of his company's executive committee, there were displayed the products of his largest competitors. His advisors told him that because of recent discoveries, it was now possible to produce the product they manufactured at a tremendously accelerated rate. Not only could their product now be manufactured in far less time, but it would affect enormous savings and thus result in substantially lower prices to the trade and the consumer. This would result, the committee pointed out to him, in mass buying of the product. But more important than that, they said, it was the only way they could remain competitive since their big competitors had now adopted these new discoveries. Well, the president examined the products of his competitors very carefully. There was no doubt about it. It was an ingenious new way to lower production costs. Then he asked the committee, will this new method make the product better, cause it to give better service and last longer? Well, the committee had to answer that it would not, that this new method, while adding greatly to manufacturing efficiencies, could not hope to match the quality of their present method of manufacturing. Then we shall continue to build our product as we have in the past. All the arguments about how the buying public would quickly shift to the competitor's new lower prices for the same product failed to move him. We will not sacrifice quality, he said. In the end, the customers will come back to us. Well, the entire executive committee was aghast at his decision. Privately, they called him an old fool, and for a couple of years, exactly what they predicted came to pass. The customers flocked to their competition. The competition sales skyrocketed because of the new manufacturing breakthrough, while my friend's company's sales steadily declined. All this while, my friend's company continued to make the best product in the industry and to advertise this fact, and that it would not compromise with quality. Since the new method of manufacture did result in an inferior product, one that would not stand up to hard use in time, the buying public began to become disenchanted. People began to realize that what had seemed to be a big saving in money was actually resulting in greater costs because of needed service. Moreover, the product just didn't perform nearly as well as did that produced by my friend's company. Well, all over the country, the reputation of my friend's company and product climbed steadily, while the reputations of his big competitors just as steadily dropped in the minds of the buying public, and just as important, in the minds of the dealers and their salesmen. Soon the tide turned completely. Today, because of that decision to stick to uncompromising quality in the face of what appeared at the time to be sheer disaster, my friend's company is the largest of its kind in the world. The company's name and the products it manufactures are first in the minds of the buying public, and there's an important lesson here for each of us. I have a book by Barry Stevens titled, Don't Push the River. What she means by that is, let the river flow. Don't try to hurry it. Time will bring the best to the top. Now, change is important, but not change for the sake of change necessarily. If we can make it better, let's change it. If we can make it more attractive, more convenient, perhaps smaller or lighter or more functional, let's do it. But let's do it gradually and make sure we know what we're doing. Let's take the time to test our new changes until we know we won't be faced with a drop in our reputation and perhaps the recalling of thousands of products with the resulting loss in time, money, and customer loyalty. Do you remember when Robert N. Manry, a copy editor at the Cleveland Plain Dealer, sailed from the United States to England in a 13.5-foot sailboat? 3,200 miles across the North Atlantic in a boat so small you'd hesitate to take it out on Lake Michigan or Long Island Sound as small craft warnings were flying. For 78 days, Manry and his tiny 36-year-old sailboat battled one of the toughest stretches of salt water on Earth. Gales blew the boat on its side. Manry tried to nap during the day and sailed at night so that he could try to avoid being run down and chopped into kindling and hamburger by great ocean-going steamers. On several occasions, he was washed over the side in heavy seas, and each time he'd haul himself back aboard by a lifeline he kept tied about himself and to his boat. He suffered terrible hallucinations, the result of having to take so many pep pills to stay awake during the long nights. Why? What made him do it? It wasn't publicity. He went about the whole thing so quietly, practically no one even knew what he was up to. He thought no one would pay any attention to him, and that was fine with him. The reason was that he had dreamed of sailing the Atlantic ever since he had been a small boy. He bought the dinky old boat for $250. He completely rebuilt it, taught himself navigation, and practiced long-distance sailing on Lake Erie. He told his wife the real reason for his embarking on so incredible a journey in so vulnerable a craft. He said to her, there's a time when one must decide either to risk everything to fulfill one's dreams or sit for the rest of one's life in the backyard. That's why Mr. Manry went sailing over the mountains of deep water in a boat only about twice the size of your bathtub. That's why he sat in his tiny open cockpit and weathered storms that caused the passengers to clear the weather decks of great ocean liners. He was fulfilling a dream he'd carried in his heart since he'd been a small boy. Well, offers for books and magazine articles poured in on him. Cleveland gave him a hero's welcome, as did the 20,000 people who wildly cheered the successful end of his voyage when he arrived in Falmouth, England. It's been proposed to Congress that Manry's boat, Tinker Bell, be placed in the Smithsonian Institution alongside Charles Lindbergh's plane, the Spirit of St. Louis. Courage. The courage to finally take one's life in one's own hands and go after the big dream has a way of making dreams come true. It seems to open hidden doorways from which good things begin to point the way. It's never easy, and the good results come only after we've made the journey in our own way. For Manry, at 47 years of age, it was sailing 3,000 miles of the North Atlantic. Each of us must make his own voyage to fulfillment in his own way. or sit in the backyard. Now here's an opportunity to test your mental health. A study made by Drs. Charles Solly and Kenneth Mumdum at the Manager Foundation came up with a prescription for good mental health. It consists of 5 parts. As I give them to you, ask yourself how you stand with regard to each. Mentally healthy people behave consistently in 5 important ways. 1, they have a wide variety of sources of gratification. This does not mean that they chase frenetically from one activity to another, but that they find pleasure in many different ways and from many things. If for any reason they lose some of their sources of gratification, they have others to turn to. For example, a person who loses a good friend by death may sorrow, but if he has other good friends, he draws psychological sustenance from them and recovers. But if a man loses his only good friend, well, he has little else to fall back on and continues to grieve in his loneliness. A person has the same problem if his only interest is his job or his immediate family or a single hobby. 2, mentally healthy people are flexible under stress. This means simply that they can roll with the punches. When faced with problems, they can see alternative solutions. Flexibility under stress is closely related to having a wide variety of sources of gratification. With more supports to fall back on, a person is less threatened by situations that produce fear and anxiety. 3, they recognize and accept their limitations and their assets. Put another way, they have a reasonably accurate picture of themselves and they like what they see. That does not mean that they're complacent about themselves, but that they know they cannot be anyone else and that it's all right with them. 4, they treat other people as individuals. Now this is a subtle phenomenon and an important one. People who are preoccupied with themselves pay only superficial attention to others. They are so tied up in themselves that they can't observe the subtleties in another person's feelings, nor can they really listen. Mentally healthy people really care about what other people feel. And 5, mentally healthy people are active and productive. Mentally healthy people use their resources in their own behalf and in behalf of others. They do what they do because they like to do it and enjoy using their skills. They do not feel driven to produce to prove themselves. They're in charge of their activities. Their activities are not in charge of them. When they're chosen for leadership of one sort or another, it's because they have the skills to lead in a given situation, not because they have to exercise power over others. They seek achievement for what they can do, not for what they can be. For when one tries to be something or someone, he's never satisfied with himself, even if he achieves the desired goal. Well, there you are, a 5-part prescription for good mental health. How'd you do? How does one obtain this condition called mental health? Well, mental health is had in the working toward, as Dr. Rogers says, in the process of becoming, of pursuit. Life is short. It's to be lived. And he who has good mental health lives it to the fullest. And he who lives it enjoyably has good mental health. A few years ago, a team headed by Dr. Gerald Gurren of the University of Michigan interviewed thousands of men and women on the source of their joys and sorrows. When the results were in, they were a surprise to everyone concerned, but they have since been confirmed by sufficient studies to validate them. Here they are. 1, married men are the happiest people in our society. Next, and I think you might be in for a surprise here, come single women. Followed in the number 3 position by wives. Bachelors bring up the rear. They're the losers in the happiness sweepstakes. 2, people who worry are happier than those who don't. Now this is another surprising but well-documented discovery. Very old people who have given up don't worry. Neither do the hopelessly poor and the downtrodden. People who are actively involved with life do. They worry constructively about their marriages, children, finances, careers in the firm and happy belief that they can change things for the better. 3, money does bring happiness. I don't think anyone ever seriously doubted this view. Certainly being unable to pay the rent and meet medical bills or finance a child's education are unhappy states of affairs. People with high incomes report being happy just as often as those with modest but adequate incomes and means do. 4, the more education a person has, the happier he tends to be. Now that certainly explodes popular opinion. In fact, the more you study, the more you realize that popular opinion is practically always pure baloney. 5, where a person lives makes little difference one way or the other as far as being happy is concerned. Apparently there's nothing to those stories of blissful rural life versus the sheer hell of city living or the claims of rival regions. 6, men tend to get more enjoyment out of children than women do. This is because men are handed the pleasures of parenthood without most of the pains. This does not mean that women would be happier without children. 7, Women who work outside the home seem to be no happier and no less happy than housewives. 8. The husband's occupation does affect the happiness of the marriage. The wives of clerical workers, salesmen, and professional men are highest in reporting happy marriages. Those of unskilled workers and farmers, the lowest. And how are you coming with your home library? Do you need some good ammunition on why it's important to read? The last time I checked the statistics, I think they indicated that only about 4% of the adults in this country have bought a book within the past year. That's dangerous. It's extremely important that we keep ourselves in the top 5 or 6%. In one of the monthly letters from the Royal Bank of Canada, and those letters are marvelous, it was pointed out that reading good books is not something to be indulged in as a luxury. It's a necessity for anyone who intends to give his life and work a touch of quality. The most real wealth is not what we put into our piggy banks, but what we develop in our heads. Books instruct us without anger, threats, and harsh discipline. They do not sneer at our ignorance or grumble at our mistakes. They ask only that we spend some time in the company of greatness so that we may absorb some of its attributes. You do not read a book for the book's sake, but for your own. You may read because in your high-pressure life, studded with problems and emergencies, you need periods of relief, and yet recognize that peace of mind does not mean numbness of mind. You may read because you never had an opportunity to go to college, and books give you a chance to get something you missed. You may read because your job is routine, and books give you a feeling of depth in life. You may read because you did go to college. You may read because you see social, economic, and philosophical problems which need solution, and you believe that the best thinking of all past ages may be useful in your age too. You may read because you're tired of the shallowness of contemporary life, bored by the current conversational commonplaces, and wearied of shop talk and gossip about people. Whatever your dominant personal reason, you will find that reading gives knowledge, creative power, satisfaction, and relaxation. It cultivates your mind by calling its faculties into exercise. Books are a source of pleasure, the purest and most lasting. They enhance your sensation of the interestingness of life. Reading them is not a violent pleasure like the gross enjoyment of an uncultivated mind, but a subtle delight. Reading dispels prejudices which hem our minds within narrow spaces. One of the things that will surprise you as you read good books from all over the world and from all times of man is that human nature is much the same today as it's been ever since writing began to tell us about it. Some people act as if it were demeaning to their manhood to wish to be well-read, but you can no more be a healthy person mentally without reading substantial books than you can be a vigorous person physically without eating solid food. Books should be chosen not for their freedom from evil, but for their possession of good. Dr. Johnson said, "Whilst you stand deliberating which book your son shall read first, another boy has read both." Emerson wrote, "Do that which is assigned you, and you cannot hope too much or dare too much." He wasn't talking about what we're assigned to do by people. He was talking about our natural assignment, that which has been built into our bones and fibers, the unseen set of our very being. 1,000 people may work for a living at the same trade, but each of them has abilities and talents uniquely his own. There are things he can do with ease because of his natural set that the other 999 people cannot do as well or with the same facility. 1,000 young women may marry and set about the business of having children and keeping houses, yet each of them is different from the other 999 in some respects. Each of them has had something assigned to her, and as Emerson said, in this area of her life, she cannot hope too much or dare too much. It's the same with every one of us, and it's through the development and fulfillment of this inborn facility that each of us can achieve a degree of greatness during his life. If we never find our strong characteristic, it's because not knowing we had it, we fail to look for it. In the Sermon on the Mount, we're told, "Ask, and it shall be given you. Seek, and you shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you." Finding our strong point is a good place to put this advice to work. Only in this way can we take the advice of Thoreau and suck the marrow from life, shave life close, and live fully extended. Many people find their real talent, but because of the advice of well-meaning friends and relatives or because of their own mistaken idea about security, remain at jobs they don't like and for which they have no real aptitude. Thus they often shackle themselves to a slow shuffle when, had they followed their real stars, they could have known so much more in the way of inner satisfaction and reward. Do that which is assigned you, and you cannot hope too much or dare too much. Games are won by people who make the fewest mistakes. A good friend of mine is a good ping-pong player, but he can't beat his son at the game. He's got all the fancy shots, but his boy just returns every one of them. He just gets the ball back across the net and waits for his father to make a mistake. I think the great Chris Everett plays tennis in much the same way. Who shoots the lowest score in golf? It's the person who makes the fewest mistakes. A golf course is so arranged and the ball and clubs are so constituted that the player is penalized for any mistake he makes, no matter how slight. In order to make it around the course in par figures, parring every hole, you must not make a single mistake. And it's the same with any game you can think of, including the game of life. As the philosophers tell us, it's all a matter of cause and effect. If the cause is right, the effect will be right. But if the cause is wrong, nothing on God's green earth can make the effect come out right ever. Except, very occasionally, by pure chance. Once in a while a golfer will make a bad shot, as I did the other day. I'd pulled my drive to the left and it was headed for water when it struck a tree, a very small tree too, and bounded back into the fairway. We saw Lee Trevino win the British Open by chipping his ball into the cup from off the green. But over a period of time, these average out with bad bounces and bad breaks. And it's the same with this business of living. We're going to have lucky breaks from time to time, especially if we're headed in the right direction. And they're great when they come along. But over the long haul, our success or failure will depend on the number of mistakes we make or don't make. For every mistake we must pay. If it's a small mistake, maybe the cost is small, but it gets us off the track. It slows us down just as a slice or hook means coming back from the rough or a lost ball. For every big mistake, the cost is big. And the biggest mistake of all is to try to live in such a way that we avoid all risks. If we played golf with nothing but a putter, we would probably never get in the rough, a sand trap, or off the fairway. But we wouldn't score well either. So, it comes down to Dr. Rogers' comment that responsible personal choice is the most essential element in being a person. Sometimes this means using a 3-wood or an iron off the tee, but usually it means using the driver. For the good player plays with risk, but concentrates on making few mistakes. It is said that a great man is always willing to belittle. He has gained facts, learns his ignorance, is cured of the insanity of conceit. And in this way he plays the game well. He makes few mistakes. He wins. A long time ago, I clipped an item from the Saturday Evening Post written by an Englishman named Nigel Balchin. He wrote, "The child is the sacred calf of the modern world, and the high priests of the child cult are always bidding us bow down and worship the sacred calf, and reminding us of all the happiness it brings to us, how beautiful and fascinating it is, and how unworthy we are of the privilege of being parents. Any man who criticizes children automatically labels himself a monster. Well, I have 5 children," he writes, "varying in age from 30 to 3. So I've been rearing sacred calves for 30 years, and will almost certainly be doing so until I die. As a result of this not inconsiderable experience, I find that the whole business is, on the whole, an expensive and unrewarding bore, in which far more has to be invested, both materially and spiritually, than ever comes out in dividends. My father worked his head off to raise me and my brother and sister. I've worked mine off in order to bring up my children. I don't doubt that in 20 years' time, my young son will be working his head off to bring up his. This process can go on indefinitely, and it simply means that no generation can ever live its own life to the full because of the insistent demands of the next. More talent and creative ability have been lost to the world through the necessity to provide for children than from any other single cause. In the whole history of civilization, 90% of man's progress has been brought about by people who realized that there were more important things to do than just reproduce their species. Some of them have had children, but they never have allowed the existence of these children to deflect them from the proper use and exploitation of their own talents." He goes on to write, "Whether we like it or not, children are fundamentally antisocial. They are cruel, ruthless, cunning, and almost incredibly self-centered, and they can conceal these qualities beneath a veil of careful charm. Let us then," he goes on to write, "stop the woolly, sentimental worship of children as living dolls and get on with the serious business of educating and maturing them as potential adults. In order to do this, we have to get rid of the idea that the family group, father, mother, and children, has some peculiar, almost mystical value. I know of no evidence that this is true, and of plenty that the family group is a source of emotional disturbance. The family group with child-worshipping parents is about the worst way in the world to bring a child to grips with the facts of adult life." The title of Mr. Bakken's article was "Children Are a Waste of Time." I remember reading that Evelyn Waugh, the author, said, "No matter how busy I may be or important the work I may be doing, I manage to spend at least 5 minutes a day with my children. And it's been said that the main reason adults want their children to grow up, marry, and have children of their own is because it's the only way they have, Pyrrhic victory though it is, of getting even with them. But when you're coming home and see your child running to meet you with its little arms outstretched and a glow of pure happiness on its face, or crawl into your lap and put its arms around your neck, it's worth it, even if it's only for the moment. Besides, let's face it, children are here to stay. My old friend Dr. Harold Blake Walker of Evanston sent me something sometime back that I enjoyed tremendously, and I think you will too. He wrote, "We live by faith, or we do not live at all. Either we venture, or we vegetate. If we venture, we do so by faith, simply because we cannot know the end of anything at its beginning. We risk marriage on faith, or we stay single. We prepare for a profession by faith, or we give up before we start. By faith, we move mountains or opposition, or we're stopped by molehills. Faith, however, is not often tranquil and steady. It ebbs and flows like the tides of the restless sea. Normally, like Browning's bishop, we are forever exchanging a life of doubt, diversified by faith, for one of faith, diversified by doubt. Yesterday, we began the day with confident hope, with trust in His promise. Last night, perhaps after a trying and troublesome day, we were beset by doubt and anxiety. We grope and fumble in search of certainty, wishing we could escape the doubts that haunt us. The peril is that we shall cease groping on through our doubts and live only on our negations. What we need, you and I, is faith strong enough to bear the burden of our doubts. No man ever drilled an oil well without being troubled by misgivings as the drill chewed downward toward producing structures, but only a fool would cease drilling halfway to the hoped-for pool. It was William Morris, the painter, who wrote, "I tell you, it's no joke to paint a portrait. Into the painting of every picture that's worth anything there comes a period of doubt and despair. The artist, however, goes on with his work beyond his doubt to creative achievement. Faith enough to carry our doubts. It's enough. Perhaps it's all we can manage when fears assail and doubts annoy. Maybe we can do no more than grope on through our uncertainties, pursuing the enterprises of our lives in the grim trust that the end will justify the struggle. If, despite our gnawing doubts, we can muster faith enough to take a single step on the road to where we're going, we are on the way to creative achievement. Every triumph of the human spirit begins with one step taken in faith. The single step is the small handle to great matters. No man or woman ever won a worthy triumph without faith to keep on and on, always able to last at least 5 minutes longer. There's one further thing to be said, namely that worthy triumphs cannot be won without faith enough to maintain our integrity. One of the ultimate tests of faith is our capacity to go on believing that somehow the right is the right, even when right is on the scaffold and wrong seems to be on the throne. All of the great ventures of our lives require faith enough to bear the burden of our doubts, so that we're able to take the first step in the direction in which we wish to go. Enough of faith to keep on going through struggle and strain, and to maintain integrity on the way. I like that. Yes, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen, and we need to exchange a life of doubt, diversified by faith, to a life of faith, diversified by doubt. Thank you.